My name is Victor Fuhrman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. Are soulmate relationships real? Furthermore, if we choose to reincarnate with our soulmate, what challenges may we face and what lessons do we learn in the process? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, medium and author Kathleen Dayan, developed a deeper understanding of soulmates and reincarnation from her spirit guides. 10 years ago, Kathleen was working as a lawyer and writing in her spare time. Some personal losses led her on a spiritual journey that ultimately resulted in her being able to channel the spirits of her loved ones and also spirit guides and teachers. The information she received changed her perspective and her life, and she left the practice of law to write novels based on the principles she had learned. Her website is KathleenReadyDayan.com, and she joins me this week to share her path and a new novel about the challenges and blessings of soulmate relationships before we were born. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited, Kathleen Dayan. Welcome, Kathleen.
Hi, Victor. Thank you so much for having me.
And thank you so much for joining us and sharing your wonderful story and amazing experience. So please share with us your early path and the events that shaped your life.
Well, I'd have to start by saying I am the youngest of 5 girls, and my parents were really wonderful parents, and they raised us. I think they were the first feminists, certainly the first that I knew. But they raised us with the idea that we can do anything. And, I just felt empowered from the time I was a child to try different things and to go in different directions. I think that is important because I have changed paths many times along the way. That was the first, really important thing from my childhood.
And did you have any experiences with psychic phenomena when you were a child?
Looking back, I can remember having dreams of my grandparents who had passed, but I didn't recognize them as anything psychic or, as any form of mediumship.
I understand. Now, you were a lawyer and a business owner. How did you transition from those roles into author and medium?
Well, I was practicing law when I developed my mediumship. And it was really over a course of years through practice of meditation and, just different, spiritual practices I employed. My husband and I are partners in all this in our spiritual education. And we started, trying to communicate with spirit. And we had been introduced to, many mediums who gave us really wonderful messages and then we also had an opportunity to try table tipping, and that, was a form of physical mediumship. And when that happened, that made us really want to go deeper and to be able to speak to people who we had lost. I have lost both my parents now, but at that time I had lost my mom at a young age and also my sister, and my husband had lost his dad at a young age. And we were really drawn to this, and we started practicing, meditation with intention, asking for help with opening up, the third eye. And then we started table tipping on our own. And over a course of really, in the beginning, it was very fast because I was very intense about this. And I started seeing spirit lights, and I started, seeing outlines of spirits in our home. And sometimes I'd wake up and I'd see someone standing at the end of the bed. I mean, it was really like a phenomenal, fascinating time in our lives. And then the two of us working together, initially we were using a table that would go back and forth and give us messages, which is table tipping. And then, slowly I began to hear what the spirits were saying. And with even a little more time, they started to come right through and speak right through my mouth. And that is the, really the backbone of our spiritual experiences, is having this direct contact with these, family and friends in the spirit world, and also with guides and teachers. So my pull towards practicing law went away real quick, Victor. It was just not, it was not compelling anymore. This was something that was, it brought so much meaning to our lives. And we already had a wonderful life, don't get me wrong. But this shifted everything. It changed our path. We had so much more peace. We had hope. We had a feeling of empowerment, which I think is an important thing when you're about to change your path. Because we felt like we were able to talk to our spirit family, and they were able to, to let us know that they were doing just fine. They were in a different plane of existence, but they were still existing just as much as we are. And that it changes the way you see the world.
Absolutely. For our listeners not familiar with the session, please just describe what a table tipping session is like.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so there's this like a small pedestal table, just like something you'd see there. Most of them are like the old-fashioned ones. Like we picked one up in a antique store to use, but they're probably like 20 inches around, something like that. Something you can even do smaller, but just room for you to put your fingers on it. And it's a small group of people that sit around the circle, and you put your hands on it and you set an intention of communicating with people in the spirit world. And, sometimes it takes a little bit to get it to move, but what eventually happens is it begins to vibrate the table, and you can feel it under your fingers. It's starting to vibrate. And then, if you make a good connection and the energy's coming through, the table will start to rock. And we've actually witnessed the table get up, and basically your hands are still on it, but it's moving around the room. Mm. It's a mind-blowing thing to see. But what would happen is when we were first exploring all these ways of communication, the table would tap out a message by, if the first letter of the word was an A, it would just go once and then it would stop. So we'd start, it was kind of a slow process, but we would write down the messages. My husband recorded, he had notebooks full of information that came from spirit. And some of it was from the early days of table tipping. And then later, when we sort of moved away from even using that, using a table or anything like it, it's also very similar to automatic writing, if anybody, out there has tried that. But just allowing the, spirit to come in and line up with me and then speak to us.
Now, you had mentioned clairvoyance, being able to see spirit and energy, clairaudience, being able to hear. Which other clairs open for you? And please describe how you recognize them.
Okay, so the first thing I experienced was clairsentience, which is when you're able to feel the touch of a spirit near you. For me, the first thing that I noticed was it feels like a spider web being dragged across your skin, across your arms or the tops of your hands. Also, it can be the feeling of electricity in your hair, as if you've just, walked across a carpet with your socks on, and, you get that electric feeling. For me, it feels like that. And I've also felt, like a pressure, like particularly when my third eye was beginning to open, when I'd be going to sleep at night, but, still wide awake, but first getting to bed, I would feel these pressures on, the top of my head and on my forehead. And I think it was, people helping me to open up.
Absolutely. One of the things that opened for me, strangely enough, in my late 40s was clairolfactance, smelling spirit. And what had manifested for me is every time I was getting communication, I started smelling roses, and there were no roses anywhere in sight.
Wow.
But that smell of roses was an indication to me that spirit was coming through. So, what advice would you offer to listeners trying to recognize their own clairs or develop them?
Probably the most important thing is to trust your gut, to sit quiet. And, I know a lot of people don't like meditation, and I'm always not always great about it either, Victor. But just to sit quiet and just try to, open up to, because, everybody has a spirit guide. At least one guide is here with us. And often we have family members that are traveling, that are staying close, and just try to be aware of their presence, just very quietly, softly open up to that. And I think just trust it. If you think, I imagine it was similar with you when you started smelling the roses, you knew what it was.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You know it in your gut.
Absolutely. You had mentioned meditation. Many of our listeners have a regular practice of yoga and meditation. How does meditation help you open to that connection?
I think it just clears a channel, honestly. There are ways that we block our channel. I'm a recovering alcoholic. I've been sober for, over 30 years. I had my teenage years were where I was sort of on a very different path. And when I got sober in my 20s, I started having I had some, past life remembrances. I have little flashes of dreams as I was going to sleep. Lots of things were starting to come to me, and I didn't understand why that was happening. But, after I'd gone through some of these other things in my life and experienced some communication, I came to understand that that channel was completely blocked. And I had always had this ability, but I hadn't allowed it. And so, being able to me, it's meditation, but it's prayer. I'm a big believer in prayer. I mean, I'm not, telling anybody to do anything that doesn't feel right to them. It's just, for me, it's an acknowledgement of, what we want to call, if it's God, if it's, the God force or the Great Spirit. For me, it's that, to understand that there is this enormous, enormous source of love. And that's what God is to me. And so for me to stay on a good, clear path, I have to remember to acknowledge that. And so, I do that. As soon as I wake in the morning, the first thing I do is look out the window and express gratitude.
I was just going to say gratitude is also so important.
Yes, it is.
It's really a key to almost everything in life, isn't it?
It is. It changes, the way your perspective, I suppose.
Absolutely. It makes you recognize the blessings in your life and be thankful for them. And I think if everyone did that, had practice of gratitude on a daily basis, their lives would be changed.
Yes.
Now, we'll be discussing your latest book, Before We Were Born, but please tell us about your earlier works.
Okay. I started writing when I was, even like, as a young child, I always loved books and I loved words. And so I've always been drawn to that. In my 20s, I wrote quite a bit of poetry, and I had a little bit of poetry published, some short stories published, that kind of thing. But I didn't attempt a novel until after I got sober. And that was such a life-changing event for me. I felt that I needed to write about it. And so I wrote this book. It's called LA Ice, and which is a slang term for the drug methamphetamine. And it's about, these people who meet in a drug rehab. And most of the book takes place there. And the focus is on how each of these people affect each other's lives. Meeting each other helps them to understand something about themselves and to, get to a better place, hopefully. Not all of them do. But that was my first book.
And you also wrote a book for kids.
I did. Yes. I wrote a book called Cape Cod Bear. And the reason I wrote this is I live in Massachusetts. I live in Plymouth, and back in 2012, out of the blue, this little black bear just showed up in Plymouth, and we don't have bears here. And as he was making his way on a little journey that he took all the way to the end of Cape Cod, which is really, quite a hike, people were spotting him and calling into newspapers, and every day it would be on the news where the black bear was seen. And I wrote a story about Barney, the Cape Cod bear, and his little vacation on Cape Cod.
Wonderful. Now, your latest book is Before We Were Born. Reincarnation is the story arc of Before We Were Born. You share that you have seen glimpses of past lives during meditation and while communicating with spirit. What were some of your past lives like?
I don't have great detail, but I have seen these glimpses of things. I know that I have been in a past life, or I think more than one past life, I was Native American. And I have a little bit of an understanding of what that history was. And some of my family from those lives have traveled with me. And so I still communicate. And, one of the spirits that I communicate with is, his name is Standing Bear. And he is in the book, and even though Before We Were Born it's a fictional story. It's about two, fictional characters who, travel here together because, they're soulmates who travel together through lifetimes. So that's all. None of that is real. It's a novel, but, the concepts are real. They're based on the things that we learned from communicating with spirit. And because I am very close to this particular spirit named Standing Bear, I wanted to write him into the book.
And how did Before We Were Born unfold for you?
The novel itself?
Yes.
The first time I sat down to write it, I actually wrote it as a screenplay first, Victor, for a couple of reasons. First of all, because I saw it as a visual story. That was how it was coming to me. But also, it helped me to organize a story that is really, it's really far-reaching, because I have the two soulmates begin the story in the spirit world. And I know that anybody picking up that book is going to look at this. They need to take a leap of faith, to go through the first chapter, because, my musings about the spirit world are, some of them are based on things that I've seen and specifically the White Garden is part of my home in the spirit world that I've seen glimpses of, during our communications and during dreams. So I wanted to use that as a setting, but it's very hard to try to make something a physical description for people when it really is not a physical thing at all.
You did a masterful job of that.
Oh, thank you so much, Victor. I appreciate that.
It is such a compelling read, listeners, that the introduction talks about these characters in the spirit realm and how they're preparing for reincarnation and some of the challenges they face. But you did an amazing job. Thank you for sharing that story.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for the comment. I appreciate that.
And I think the movie would be an excellent follow-up. What are the plans? Any plans?
No plans, but, I'm ready,
And Before We Were Born, your soulmate lead characters make choices, as I had shared, some pleasant and some very difficult, but it will allow them to find one another in the next incarnation. Based upon your mediumship and experiences, may we actually make choices before coming back, such as our parents and our life paths?
Yes. Yes. Based on my experience, I believe we all play a role in choosing not just our parents, but other people that we're going to travel with and our life path. I think we come here with lots of plans. I think some of them we stick to the script and some we don't. I also think that these decisions are often made in cooperation with other souls, so that to me, it's there's a line in the book where it says, life is cooperation, even when we don't know it. It's a creative cooperation because we're all attached. We're all, connected to each other.
Absolutely. One of the things that I've recognized in my life is that there have been a number of synchronicities presented to me throughout my life. And it took me a while to recognize them, especially into my mid to late 30s, where I started really opening and recognizing these synchronicities. And every time I would say yes to something that was presented to me, every time I had three choices. I could say, not for me, and just dismiss it out of hand. I could say, yes, that's interesting, but not right now. Or I could say, yes, I have to pursue that right now. And every time I said that big yes, something wonderful happened and led to another one and another one. Is that what we're talking about?
I love that. I love how you described that. Yes, I think, I think when you feel that kind of pull, it's like your soul is excited. Your soul saying, yes, this is where we're going. Let's go. We're waiting for this. I think it's an exciting thing.
Absolutely. My guest is Kathleen Reddy Dayan. Her book is called Before We Were Born. Kathleen, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you and your work.
Well, it's on Amazon. Before We Were Born is on Amazon. It's on Barnes & Noble and a lot of local stores, but I don't know exactly which ones in everyone's area. So you can also look at my website, which is just my full name, which is Kathleen with a K, Reddy, just the way it sounds. And then Dayan is DAYAN .com. That's my website. And you can find out about, different events and interviews like this and, also where to get the book.
And as we always say, go to your local bookstore because we need to support them and ask for Before We Were Born by Kathleen Reddy, Dayan. And if they say we don't have it, tell them to order it for you, please, because we got to keep those local bookstores going. And we'll be back with more of Kathleen after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
The best of the holistic, spiritual, and conscious world. OMTimes Radio. IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Imagine yourself being transported to India, to the banks of the Ganga and an ashram in Rishikesh. Visualize that you are welcome to satsang with an American sannyasi who shares the wisdom of her guru. Your visualization has manifested. Join Sattvi Bhagawati Saraswati for inspiration and transformation every Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern on OMTimes Radio.
They are our love bugs and companions. They are our pets, our family, and they make life better. When we face unexpected challenges, so do our pets. That's why we're on a mission to support people and their pets. Whether donating a bag of kibble, sharing an Instagram post of a lost cat, or welcoming a foster pet into your home, every bit of kindness counts. Visit petsandpeopletogether.org to learn how to be a helper in your community. Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
Are you about to mow the lawn? It's blazing hot out here. Smokey Bear says,
avoid using power equipment when it's windy or dry. It's all on SmokeyBear.com because only you can prevent wildfires.
Brought to you by the USDA Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Kathleen Reddy Dayan. Her book is called Before We Were Born. Kathleen, in Before We Were Born, your protagonist, Jeremy, is born to an alcoholic mother by choice and for proximity to soulmate Joy. You shared before that you're in recovery from alcoholism and can speak to that firsthand. Was weaving your experience into Jeremy's a challenge for you?
No, actually, that part's easy because I've lived it. So I understand, sometimes, parts of my life come out on the pages that they just flow out. And it's just because it just comes out, naturally. I have an understanding of what alcoholism does to a human being, and what it does to the people around them. And it's such a tragic thing. And I wanted to talk a little bit more about that. And so, and how often it's passed down also. So we have this little boy who's born, Jeremy, and we meet him, in the first chapter, we meet him, and he's Elia, and he's this great soul in the spirit world. And he's this incredibly intuitive, wonderfully kind soul. And he's going to be born again, not so much because he wants to come to earth again and be on the earth plane right now, but because his partner does. And so because she chooses to be with someone who was her mom in another lifetime, and she has her own reasons for wanting to be here. And so he rather blindly follows her because he loves her so much and he wants to be with her. And so he says, I'll follow you. I always follow you. And he does. And so he chooses to be born to this woman who lives just, a couple houses away from his soulmate, knowing that this way, even in this very busy modern world that we're all in, he's going to meet her. And he knows that when he meets her, he'll know her, he'll recognize her. And so the woman, that's having this child is a drug addict and an alcoholic, and she's really just very ill. And she gives birth to this baby who, is Jeremy, and he's born 3 months early, and he's tiny, tiny little baby, and he barely survives. And he has, we find out later that he's born with fetal alcohol syndrome. We also know that he has some other impairments. His vision isn't very good, and he has some other physical impairments from being born to an alcoholic. But he's kind of caught now in this home life with this woman. She's, the dad is gone. His dad has moved on, and it's just him and this, really kind of raving alcoholic. And he finds some safety and some love, from this other family down the street who are, the family that his soulmate chose. And so there's this stark contrast between these two lives who lived, on the same street in the same little town, but have very, very different experiences.
For our listeners not familiar with it, please describe fetal alcohol syndrome.
Okay, so that's, a condition that can happen when a mother is drinking during pregnancy, and it affects the fetus so that it can be, varying degrees of, severity. And so sometimes, like, a child could be born really, mentally impaired. And sometimes it's like you can see by their face, they have certain physical characteristics. For instance, the little dent above the lips, that there will be flat. That's one of the signs that the physicians will pick up on early on, things like that. But Jeremy is born, he looks flawless. He's this beautiful little child, and nobody picks up on it until he goes to school and he struggles so much. And they start, working with him and realize he's 11 years old when they finally realize this, and he's already fallen very far behind. But, it's just an effect of the pregnancy and, having the alcohol go into his system.
Let's talk about soulmates. Many are familiar with the term, and some are familiar with the concept of twin flame soulmates. Your characters in Before We Were Born might easily be seen as twin flame. Are twin flame soulmates and relationships real?
I can't really speak to twin flames in the way that I understand them. If you correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's sort of the idea of two parts making up a whole.
Yes.
So that we're sort of missing something. That has not been, my experience or, what I've learned, but that doesn't mean, I certainly don't know even a tiny bit of all there is to know. I just think that we have many soulmates. I don't think there's one person that's going to make us whole and that we're only half until we find them. I think we're always whole. We come here as a an empowered, wonderful soul. We're all that. At the source, that's what we all are. We don't always remember that. When you look in the mirror, you don't always realize, like, I am the soul who came forth here to do wonderful things, to bring love to this world, to, change things in a positive way. We don't always remember that about ourselves, but I do believe that's what we all are.
So it's possible to have more than one soulmate relationship in a lifetime.
Yes, there is. And, before we were born, I talk about romantic soulmates. And this really is a very romantic partnership that these two have, because they've traveled, through many lifetimes together. And, you find out a little bit about this, later in the book when they, I don't want to give anything away, but there's times when there's glimpses back and they are realizing like all the times they've been together. It's really a romantic idea, but we have soulmates who are, friends and family and people, our moms and dads, or people that we just say, hey, I'm going to travel with you this time. Do you want to? I really believe I think it's cooperative. I think we choose who, when and, who we're coming with.
Are soulmate relationships, I'm talking about romantic soulmate relationships, are they all lollipops and roses, or are they challenges, or do they have challenges?
I think there's lots of challenges. And I think that's part of the adventure, and that's certainly what happens in the, in the story that I wrote. But, I think part of why I wrote it this way, Victor, is because it's not a romance novel. It really isn't, because it's not a formula. Life isn't that. There's not you're not going to ride off on the white horse with this certain guy and everything is wonderful from then on. It's better than that. Really, it's because you get to grow on your own. You don't need anybody to rescue you, and you can have this soulmate, this person that you work with in a partnership, and have this lifetime together that's probably going to go on to another lifetime, and at least into the spirit realm when you pass out of this life. And you help each other to learn things, and some of those things are really hard. Like Jeremy, being, he's an alcoholic. He blocks his spirit and his channel, and suddenly he can't hear spirit anymore, which is one of the things that he was born with, his gift. And that was really going to help him, stay on the path. And he blocked his own channel. But, we do these things. We're human beings, and we make mistakes, and we don't always stay on the path, but our soulmates, they bump us along and help us get back on the right path.
And do we have soulmate relationships that follow us lifetime after lifetime?
Yes, I think every relationship is different, just as there is here. But I am sure there are people that they want to stay together. I believe that at the heart of all of it is our own will, what we want to do. I don't believe that this is, if anything is predestined, it's because we have, thought very deeply about this before we got here and made some choices about what we would like to experience while we're here. I don't think anybody is, pulling any strings and that we're puppets. I think that self-will is a huge part of it.
So we do have freedom in this process to choose who we come back with and how we come back.
Yes.
So it's free will, it's totally free will.
It's free will, but also with guidance. So if you go off kind of willy-nilly, which is what Jeremy does, when he's Ilya, he says, I'll follow you no matter what. And his guides are telling him, pick another mother. This is not a good idea. And he doesn't take the advice. And so part of why I wrote it that way, Victor, is because I think that, even on the other side, we're still human, even as spirits. So even then, we're not perfection, we're not God. There's still going to be choices that we make that maybe weren't the easiest. It doesn't mean they're wrong per se, but, Jeremy could have chosen someone else and, gone a different path and had faith that he was going to meet her anyway, but he didn't. He kind of forced his will on that.
Now, you had mentioned soul families. What is the spiritual component that drives our choices of soul family?
I'm not sure I understand the question exactly.
How do we choose our soul family, our mothers and our fathers and our brothers and our sisters? What's the choice mechanism?
I think it's just, again, it's what before we come here, we've lived together before. I don't believe anybody comes here and is completely a stranger to the entire family. And, I think there's always these connections, even before, so that as a spirit making this decision to go forth and be on the earth plane again and being born to a certain family, there's a reason they chose that family.
It's interesting, and without going into a lot of details, my parents, I could see me choosing my parents because of the lessons that I learned through their relationship with them, with each other, through their relationship with me, and how it unfolded and set me the course for my life to unfold. So I can understand that concept.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Are there some childhood friends that are soul friends, and how do those friendships influence our lives?
I have certainly had the feeling of that with friends that I grew up with. I think that, the people we grow up with are always influencing us. I feel for the rest of my life, I'm sure I'm going to be influenced by my friend across the street that I climb trees with, because it was my first feeling of really true trust and just being completely open, as children, the way we are with our friends. We can't recreate that as adults, the experiences we have when we meet people and we form these bonds. And I feel like, those bonds are going to last my lifetime.
There's an innocence in those bonds, isn't there?
There is.
And what is the gift of that innocence?
Just kind of, I think to me, it reminds me of who I am, before I grew up and maybe, took a whole bunch of different paths and, became jaded in some ways and then grew past that in other ways. There's still that reminds you really that who we are as a child. You can look back on that and you can see yourself as a soul then, I think, easier than looking at your adult body and looking in the mirror and thinking, okay, this is just a mechanism for the soul to be here on this earth plane. But when I see children, and I remember my own childhood, it makes me feel almost like what it would be like to relate to other people in the spirit realm because of that pure trust and openness. And we don't hold anything back. We share everything. We tell everything. I mean, it's a different kind of friendship.
There was an old Moody Blues song called Through the Eyes of a Child, and the lyric went in part, through the eyes of a child, or with the eyes of a child, you must come out and see that your world is spinning round, and through life you will be a small part of a whole, of a love that exists. With the eyes of a child, you will see.
That's beautiful.
Absolutely. And I think that concept of rebirth gives us an opportunity, that reincarnation rebirth gives us an opportunity to see with those eyes once again. I think that's an important reinforcement for each lifetime, isn't it?
I think it is, yes.
Now, Before We Were Born, you share that when we reincarnate, we have soul guides, some of whom may have been family. How may we understand and recognize these soul guides?
The first thing, that I would say is, again, it's what you feel. We talked about a little bit earlier about opening up to our different gifts that we might have, the clairs, and I think that it's the same response here, is that, just being really quiet with yourself and being open to it. Maybe, we all have various gifts. So, you shared with me that you were able to, the scent, you could pick up a scent in spirit. And some people I've heard, they'll smell pipe smoke or something around them. And, they'll start to connect. Oh, that's what my grandfather, smelled like. And there's no one around smoking a pipe, that kind of thing. It's just being open to it.
And in being open to it, how do we ask for their guidance?
Just ask, because anything you say, I've learned something interesting, and that is that even if you don't say something out loud, if you're thinking about a certain particular, person that's in spirit, and your communication is, targeted toward that person. So you're missing someone, a lot, and you're thinking about, your mom or your brother or somebody you lost, and you're thinking about them and thinking about them. That creates an energy of its own, and that reaches them, and they're able to just pull to you. It's like they're right here. And I think that's a good way to connect.
Absolutely. My guest, Kathleen Reddy Dayan, her book, Before We Were Born. We'll be back with more after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Humanity Healing International is a small nonprofit with a big dream. Since 2007, HHI has been working tirelessly to bring help to communities with little or no hope. Our projects are not broad mandates, nor are they overnight solutions, but they bring the reassurance that no one is alone and that someone cares. To learn more, please visit humanityhealing.org. Humanity Healing is where your heart is.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
Hello, I'm Sandy Sedgbeer, host of OMTimes Magazine's flagship radio show, What is Going On? My passion is sifting through information, research, and innovations from new thought teachers, speakers, and researchers pushing back the boundaries of what we know about life, energy, metaphysics, and the universe. I love shifting perceptions about who we are, why we're here, and how quickly impossible becomes normal when we open our minds, expand our awareness, and accept that the only limits that exist are those we place upon ourselves. So if you're the kind of forward-thinking, eager investigator of what lies beyond the current reality that most perceive, why not make a date to come play with me in the field of possibilities at 4 p.m. Pacific Time, 7 p.m. Eastern Time every Thursday, and together we can discover what's really going on.
Grab a cup of tea or a glass of wine and tune in for Inspired Conversations with publisher Linda Joy on Tuesdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. Linda creates sacred space for leading female luminaries, empowering authors, heart-centered female entrepreneurs, coaches, and healers. A soulful venue where guests openly share the fears and obstacles they've overcome, wisdom and lessons learned, and the personal journey that led them to the transformational work they do in the world. Inspired Conversations to empower you on your path to authentic, soulful living.
We've all felt left out. And for people who move to this country, that feeling lasts more than a moment. We can change that. Learn how at belongingbeginswithus.org. Brought to you by the Ad Council.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week, Kathleen Reddy Dayan. Her book is called Before We Were Born. Kathleen, do we have soulmate animal companions too?
I think we do. I don't know a lot about this, Victor. I just know that, I feel really strongly towards my animals. And one of the things, so we have a little dog, a little Boston Terrier, and we had another Boston Terrier before who had passed away. And I asked one of my friends in spirit, I knew she was going to pass. And I asked one of my spirit friends, would you please take her when she passes? Keep her safe. And I know she'll be there when I get there. I know that they come close to us. How extensive that is, I don't know, but I do. I know that they're still there when we get there.
Absolutely. Just a personal story. When my stepson Alex was 13, he had asked us for a dog, and we hadn't had any pets together up to that point. And I said to him, absolutely, we're going to go out and we're going to look. We're going to go to several shelters here in New York. But don't fall in love with the first dog that you see, because we're not going to just adopt any dog. It has to be a dog that you're going to be comfortable with. He was a small guy, and I wanted to make sure that this dog would not overwhelm him. And we had gone to a number of wonderful shelters out here in Long Island and seen many wonderful animals, but nothing that really connected. And we went to the final stop of the day, a place called the Little Shelter out in Long Island. And I dropped them off at the office, and I went into the parking lot and parked, and I walked into the office, and here is Alex laying on the floor, laughing hysterically with this beautiful white and maroon mottled dog on top of him licking his face. And I said, "What's going on here?" And they said, and Lori Sue said, my wife said, that we walked in, and immediately this dog was there. A couple had adopted her and was bringing her back because she couldn't get along with the dog that they already had. And as we arrived, this happened. So they had a situation where we could play with her for a little while. They had a special play area, and we were playing together. And we were about to make the decision, and we had a little custom called the bug hug. And when we had a decision to make, we'd all gather together in a circle, hug each other, snug as a bug in a rug. Yeah. And we'd say, "Is this the right thing?" And as soon as we joined into the bug hug, this dog crawled up between the middle of us and joined us and we knew she was the one.
That is
and
great.
Because of the fact that she kissed him when they met, and also it was fate that she was coming back at the same time that we arrived, we named her Kismet.
Oh, I love
Kismet
that.
was a wonderful companion for many years, and she absolutely was a soul family member. There's no question about it.
Yes, I understand that. That is a beautiful story.
Thank you. Now, there's a wonderful fable that says when we are born, an angel or a spirit guide presses on our upper lip and gently says, "Shh, don't tell what you've learned or seen." And this is why we have the depression in our upper lips and little memory of our past lives. Now, you share that old souls remember more when we reincarnate. What do you think is the reason for this?
I think it has to do with, part of it, I was going to say practice, sounds very simplistic, but also, like people who have incarnated so many times, I just think they're more in touch with their intuitive abilities. Like Jeremy in the story, he's been through a lot, through many lifetimes. We don't know all those yet, but we know that in the spirit realm, he has this gift of attracting animals to him, and that they trust him, and that they know he's going to be, care for them. And then he has the birds in the book, and he takes care of those birds. And, the whole story with him with the bird on his shoulder and walking around the neighborhood. And he remembers, in that scene, he has this sense of that old man who lives in his neighborhood, who came by to see him when he was like 2 years old. He was out near the road by himself because his mom wasn't, able to take care of him. And this old man came by and told him, you can't be out here by yourself. And Jeremy puts his hands on the old man's knee and helps to heal him. He's still so tapped into his spirit that he doesn't know he's a healer. He doesn't know that he doesn't come with the knowledge as, we would see it here in human form as, written down anywhere. It's just something that in his soul, he knows what the right thing to do is to touch this man on the knee, and it's going to help him. And it does. And then later, he remembers the man and he honors him by walking around the neighborhood. He knows where the man lived because his soul is connecting to this person, and he stops in front of his house, and he's got this bird on his shoulder. And that's his ritual in the morning before he goes to school, because he wants to honor the person who helped him on his path.
It's funny. I've been told that I've been an old soul many, many times. And I have that sense of it, that I've been around many, many times before. And a few months ago, I had gotten myself a new pair of shoes, and they weren't comfortable. And I put on the old shoes, and they were comfortable, and they were sloppy, and they were decrepit, but they were very comfortable. And I thought for a second, I said, you know what? I'm an old soul in old souls. I felt that way. It was really a great feeling. One of the important lessons you share in the book, what you had just described, is the healing power of touch. Does this manifest on both sides of the spirit realm?
I think it does. I mean, I feel like earlier when I was describing to you clairsentience and having that feeling of a spirit touching me, I think it happens between worlds. So I think that people, like on the spirit side, when we're feeling those spider webs or we're feeling the pressure on our head, it's people, they're touching us. They're doing the same thing that we do. We go, if somebody's in pain, if somebody's struggling, you hug them, you hold them, and you're sharing your energy and you're loving them. And that is how we heal each other. I think touch is imperative. It's how you express love. And I think it's we still do it even as souls. And I think Jeremy and then Joy as spirits, they're Ilya and Callie, and they talk about how they're really like light. We're made of light when we don't have the body, and they're saying, like, when they're embracing each other in spirit, they don't know where one begins and the other, one ends and the other begins, because it's just a blending of their energies.
Absolutely. One of the most moving concepts that you share in Before We Were Born is, and I quote, "Love is the law that governs all that is and all that will ever be." How may we remember this when we reincarnate into a world that surely needs that love now?
Well, I don't know what to say, because that's something, it's hard for us to remember on a daily basis now, it's just, to me, it's just being in touch with your soul, which is just this whole tapping into your intuitive self and understanding, coming to the understanding that you are a sacred soul. That whoever you are here on the earth plane, and it doesn't matter how successful or, how messy or how, whatever your life has been, at any point in time, you can stop and realize, if you take that time to connect with that and realize that you are a sacred soul. And if you are that, you're not going to want to harm anyone else or anything else, because that's not what you are. You're love. So I guess the answer to that is to look inside, because if you want to remember that love is the law that governs all that is and all that will ever be, it's really, if you see inside yourself and you make peace with that and you understand how great you are as a soul, and you don't hurt anybody, and you don't, it's just, you're aligning yourself with that concept.
It's interesting that when I attended the new seminary for interfaith studies, one of the things that we learned is that in virtually every faith around the world, there is an iteration of the golden rule. Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. Love thy neighbor as thyself. If everybody practiced that, what a world we would have, wouldn't it? That's
all we need. That's it. Because it does. It just encompasses, it encompasses all the religions and all the, it's really all we would need to live a beautiful life and have peace on earth.
Absolutely. What would you like readers to take away from Before We Were Born?
I really wrote the book because I wanted to let people know how much having the information that I have as a medium, it has made me feel less afraid of living my life the way I want to live my life. It's made me less afraid of death. And it's given me so much solace, because I know that everyone that I love who has passed over to the spirit world is alive and well. And I mean, really living joyfully. I've had so many examples of that, through mediumship communication, of people coming back and showing themselves to me and saying, "Don't worry about me. See me. I'm doing wonderfully." They're full of love and light, and they're just so joyful. And I just would like to pass that on. I hope people take that away from the book.
There is no death, just a change of situation.
That's right.
Absolutely. Please tell us about your next book.
Well, I have a book coming out in October, which is not part of this. I'm working on a series for this book, Victor. I'm writing a sequel to Before We Were Born right now. But in between the two, I wrote another book. It's called Bridge Jumping. And it's, kind of what you and I were just talking about a couple minutes ago about different religions and what's at the heart of them. And this is a story about this woman. We open up the first chapter and it's her funeral. She's 40 years old and she's passed away, and she's asked for her body to be cremated and divided into 12 glass vials. And for the people closest to her to, each take a vial and bring it to a place that would honor the relationship that they had with her. And so it's really about, different spiritual paths and where they lead us and how they affect our relationships and, our perspectives on life. And we get to, know the protagonist her name is Paige, and she's still the protagonist because even though she's passed from the beginning, we're following some of her journal entries as we go through, and, every chapter leads to another one of her family or, family members or friends where they're going with the ashes and why they're taking them there. And, it has a lot to do with, how we heal from grief.
Absolutely. My guest, Kathleen Reddy Dayan, her book, Before We Were Born. One more time, please tell our listeners where they can get your book and find out more about you.
You can look at my website, which is Kathleen Reddy Dayan, last name is spelled DAYAN.com. And that will tell you lots of things about where, different events and where you can get the book, but you can also get it on Amazon or Barnes & Noble.
Kathleen, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this very powerful and moving and wonderful story.
Thank you so much, Victor. I really enjoyed speaking with you.
And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.